Welcome back to the Jim Leach Show, live in downtown Springfield, brought to you by St. John's Hospital, transforming healthcare, and by Williamsville State Bank and Trust. Watching mortgage rates? Just go to WSBT.net and sign up for Rate Alert today. We are in our downtown studios this morning, and we are pleased to be joined by phone by our Congressman in Washington. He is going to be, I think, a very vocal voice in the upcoming debate on health care reform. This is a debate that is just raging right now, and Congressman John Shimkus very outspoken on it from the beginning. He talked to reporters yesterday in a conference call and joins us live this morning. Congressman, good morning to you.
Hey, Jim, good morning. I love that downtown studio, so I know it's a little lonely down there, but I really do like it. So
well, we occasionally have people just wandering in off the street just to say hi, and so next time you're in town, make sure you stop by and see us, or we'd love to have you sit down in person sometime very soon.
You bet.
Well, Congressman, let's go ahead and jump right into the health care debate here. This has been going on for months now. We're getting closer and closer to a final vote on some of these plans, and it looks like the Democratic plan is going to have this public option. The GOP putting together its own plan now to try to counter this. So give us just a quick overview. Where do you see this going, and do you think that you're going to be able to derail what the Democrats are trying to do?
No, I don't think. I really don't think that the overall plan, which is on the House side, about 2,000 pages, and it's bigger than just a public option. But as I said yesterday, the public option and this issue on comparative effectiveness is of major concern to me. The big fight right now is the abortion language. In fact, I picked up a paper. I'm in my office, so as some stuff are delivered to the door, and that seems to be really the sticking point now. If they can resolve that, or maybe they can pull the votes away, even by letting the pro-life Democrats not have their say because of the majority. I think they kind of get it done. They did drop a manager's amendment last night. I don't know how long that is. The Republicans' alternative is like 219 pages, and I haven't gone through that yet, so I don't really know the specifics of that, which hopefully I'll get to sometime today. And 72 hours when they drop the manager's amendment, which means the earliest we would vote would be Saturday. They have told us to be prepared to be here Monday and Tuesday, and that's kind of where we stand.
Now, just so we're clear, you talked about the abortion language, and this is the notion that if there were a public option, it would allow for the expenditure of federal dollars to cover abortion services for women who might be covered under that public option. And that is, as you mentioned, causing some concern not just among the GOP, but also among pro-life, more conservative Democrats in the House.
About 40 pro-life Democrats are really digging in their heels. And I mean, again, we're since I've been here, we're a super minority, and so that's the real debate's there. To make this clear, and not to try to, I think that the Democrats on the public option plan are saying you could have two public plans, one that ensures that there's no abortion services covered, and one that does. But I think everything goes back to the debate on the Hyde Amendment, which says no taxpayer funds go to support or assist in essence, elective abortion services. And that's kind of where the line in the sand has been drawn from the pro-life community.
It's interesting in that a couple of aspects of this are getting caught up in what this ultimate plan for healthcare reform will mean for coverage that certain groups may or may not want. And you brought up yesterday, and it kind of ties into this, I think, a little bit in terms of women's healthcare services in particular. You talked about how you want to see the restriction lifted so that insurance companies would be able to sell their products across state lines. But that could mean, as I understand you describing it, watering down perhaps some of the state regulations that vary from state to state, such as in Illinois, for example, insurance companies being required, if they offer outpatient services or prescription drug coverage, they have to cover oral contraceptives. You would, in fact, put in a system whereby those regulations wouldn't necessarily have to be followed so that insurance companies could sell across state lines. Do we really want a system, though, where if a state says we think it's important that these sorts of things be covered, that could be overridden through the system you're talking about?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. And so then you find guys like me, conservatives, in essence, federalists, in essence, speaking against the powers of the states. I do think you can make the Interstate Commerce Clause argument that this is a national purchasing of a product, and that there is jurisdiction at the federal level for standards. Now, I also think the public really has to get a hold of, why do you have insurance? And most insurance products are purchased for catastrophic coverage, so that if you lose your car, you get your car replaced. If you lose your home, you can rebuild your home. If you move in a direction of catastrophic coverage, where that if someone has a major medical event, that they do not fear losing their home, they do not fear going bankrupt, they don't fear that because they will be covered. The question is, on these ancillary services, how should they be paid? And on ancillary services, I think it'd be better for the consumer to realize what is really the cost of this, and the individual consumer making a choice on the services that they want based upon shopping around.
I want to go to the GOP plan now, and I don't know if you've seen the full thing's been proposed. I haven't read the bill. I've just read a synopsis of it. But from what I'm reading about it, the proposal from Congressman Boehner would not ban companies from denying individuals coverage on the basis of pre-existing conditions. I know you said yesterday you think the pre-existing condition issue needs to be addressed in any health care reform package. So are you not with Boehner in the GOP plan at this point?
Well, the real option will be how this stuff proceeds and how the votes roll out. And I mean, I just pulled up the amendment on. So again, like I said in the beginning, I haven't read all the specifics. It's 219 pages. I do plan to get to it. The reality is, if it's a choice between a public option that is government subsidized, that will compete unequally with the private sector, thus moving people in 10 and 15 years from their private insurance to a government option, which would then result in a one-payer plan. I mean, that's my issue is, where are we at in 10, 15 years from now? And I know where Barney Frank and Jan Schakowsky and Howard Dean and President Obama want us to go. They are one-payer folks. They have been unabashedly saying, and that's fine. There are people who believe that health care services should be provided only by the government through government, like a Medicare, Medicaid type program. Now, I understand the problems with both of those policies. So if it's a choice over what they have offered and a market approach, I will go with the market approach. I will hope that we would address the pre-existing debate, and I will hope we address the caps placed on policies, because I still believe you have to have sick people have to be in an insurance plan. Someone's going to pay. Either the hospitals write it off, the practitioners write it off. So I think the public as a whole, because we're very compassionate people, would understand that if our individual or our employers' insurance rates went up because we're keeping sick people in plans, I think we would do that versus turning it over to a bureaucrat to make these decisions.
But the bureaucrats make the decisions now in the market approach. It's the insurance company bureaucrats that make the decisions. Isn't the market approach why where we're at right now?
There is a huge difference between Medicare and Medicaid and the bureaucrats making the decisions and the insurance policy, because eventually the insurance policy guys are the real savings is waste, fraud, and abuse. Where do you see waste, fraud, and abuse in the insurance provision of healthcare packages? Again, remember, most people have private insurance. Most people like their plan. Where do you see billions of dollars? Again, 60 Minutes just did the thing on Medicare fraud and these storefront shops that you can't even, there's no one in there, and millions of dollars. And we don't catch them until 5-10 years down the path, because we're not doing the scrutiny up front. So, yeah, we have low administrative costs. But why do we have low? Because we're not worried about the shareholder wealth. We're not worried about who we send the payment to. We're just sending the payment.
Well, and I guess we define abuse. You could define it a couple of different ways. It seems to me when a company drops somebody because they've developed cancer and they've maxed out after paying premiums for years, that seems fairly abusive to me.
I agree. I'm with you on that.
And what's the option then, though? Because you can't just go to another company.
Well, I think if we look at the bill, again, I haven't looked at it, but I think there's going to be these catastrophic pools. I would hope that that's in the bill, which is what the president talked about in his speech, which is what John McCain had pushed for, that states have catastrophic pools to cover at our expense, the taxpayers' expense, the individuals who have catastrophic events that have no health insurance. And we as a society say, hey, this is important, so we will pay tax dollars to have this catastrophic pool for people who are uninsured. And that, I mean, the president, even in their bill, the time between enactment and passage of the bill is like 3 years. We create these pools to immediately cover them. So if it's a good enough idea now, in the interim, why isn't it a good enough plan to do infinitum?
But and again, and my apologies, because like you, I have not seen the Boehner proposal yet. But if I'm understanding the terminology correctly, a catastrophic pool would kick in when somebody's already facing this sort of very serious illness, as opposed to, because part of the problem with the current system is people can't get insurance, they forego health care, that things progress to the point where then it becomes catastrophic.
Well, that's why we have, I mean, you got one in Springfield. That's why we have community health clinics. And, you know, one good thing about the Democrat bill, as you go through, they expand community health clinics and rural health clinics. I mean, there's expansion of the clinics, and you know, one of the benefits of the rural health government subsidized clinics is they have medical liability protection. But there's nothing in the bill. CBO scores it as a $51 billion in savings, and in fact, the bill is egregious. The Democrat bill is egregious because it says, hey, if you are a state and you pass medical liability reform, you can't come to us for grants to try to reform the system. All right, you as a state, now we're talking on the other side. If the state has decided that to help control costs, medical liability reform is needed, and they pass it, well, that's fine, but don't come to us for these grants to help reform your system because you can't apply.
And so you're expecting now this could come to a vote as early as the first part of next week, Monday or Tuesday?
Saturday. Could be Saturday.
Could be as early as Saturday. Yeah. Okay. We'll be watching that very carefully. Congressman, while we've got you here, I wanted to ask you on a couple of other issues while we've got you standing by. I know that the German Chancellor, Angela Merkel, addressed a joint meeting of Congress yesterday talking about climate change. Any reaction to what
that was the end of her speech.
Uh-huh.
She talked about the importance of NATO. She talked about
and the 20th anniversary of the Berlin Wall.
Yeah,
sure,
yeah.
But I was kind of curious as to what you thought about, because I understand from what I read that she got a standing ovation from part of the chamber, but not the rest of the chamber when she was talking about the need to all work together on climate change.
She's wrong. It's good. They can have their values and they have their beliefs. Carbon dioxide is not a toxic pollutant. Just not. And because it's not a toxic pollutant, we shouldn't then, in this environment, discourage and job creation and have higher cost energy to move in a direction that the world is not ready to go.
The situation in Afghanistan, we've still got the president not yet making up his mind whether we're going to send more troops here. We have the election being resolved this week in a kind of unusual way, with the challenger saying, I can't get a fair shake here, so I'm dropping out. So Karzai's back in again. Should we commit more troops to Afghanistan? And what are we really fighting for? What's the end game on this if we put thousands more troops over there?
Yeah, I think the end game is to make sure that there is a government in Afghanistan that it can protect itself, be an ally in the war on terror. In other words, disallow safe havens for al-Qaeda through Taliban-controlled areas. And that's, once we can achieve that, we can all go home. I mean, again, the chancellor also appreciated her strong words of support. The Germans have not been as helpful. They're in the northern part of Afghanistan. They have what's called caveat. They don't get into the battle. They're not allowed to move all over the country. So as much as they've committed a lot and they're 1/3 of the force, if they're not 1/3 of the force that's fighting, they're not as helpful as if they were maybe 1/10 of the force in fighting.
How long do you think, if we put another, and I think the number was 40,000 troops in there, how long do you think reasonably it would take to achieve the goals you set out here for Afghanistan?
Well, I think this is no other than the terrain, which I don't want to underscore, and the multitude of ethnic populations in Afghanistan, which are probably 10 times more than Iraq. This is the same debate we had in the Iraqi surge. It was actually costly in our precious commodity, which is the lives of our young men and women. It was financially costly in the dollars that we spent to do this. The population was actually more adverse to the Iraqi surge than the debate now. And you know that because you followed that. Mm-hmm. And elected officials like me had to make a decision early, and which at the time was not in line with the popular opinion that they all felt that was lost. Again, you know this because you cover these issues. And this is the same debate. And we'll see what the president decides to do. I think it's very difficult for him because throughout the campaigns and stuff, he always said, we should be in Afghanistan, we should not be in Iraq. Now, what's he going to do now? I think you've got to allow the commanders in the field to make the military decisions needed to reach our objectives, and that's how I would define the objectives of the United States. And General McChrystal is his guy. McChrystal's been on the ground for 5 months. And
Congressman, I'm sorry to interrupt because I'm almost out of time here. I wanted to get one last question in. You've got an opponent who's filed to run against you next year. One of the things he's talking a lot about is he says he's bringing up what he calls your disrespect to the president in that joint session of Congress earlier this year on health care when you actually got up and walked out during the speech. He says he's heard from people who are really upset about it. What reaction are you getting to that? And do you regret what you did on the floor of the Congress on that night?
Well, this is not a big deal. It's never been written about in Washington. The president invited me to play basketball with him. And president's got a thick skin and he's a mature adult. If it was a huge deal, I wouldn't have been invited to the White House. It is a non-issue. So if that's the concern, I'll tell you, I've had a lot of people say, "Way to go, more of you should have walked out." You can read the. I have had friends and supporters say, "Man, you should have stuck around." I'm not going to deny that. Is that enough to cause people to change? Jim, I've got a Republican primary guy who filed. So I've got before my general, I've got a primary issue, and I guess I'm not conservative enough.
I'm sorry, Congressman. That just struck me as funny. Congressman John Shimkus, listen, thank you very much for your time. Always a pleasure to talk to you. We appreciate it. We're tight on time here. Have a great day.
Take care, Jim.
6:50.